This is my 97 Sportster. Well, I figured I'd go over this thing a little bit before I start fixing a handful of things that is wrong with it. When I decided to hardtail this, there's only like a couple people making hardtail kits back then. This hardtail kit come from a place called Kansas Customs. He was up out of upper, I don't remember the name of the town, but it's outside of Joplin, Missouri. So he wasn't but 2.5, 3 hours away from me at the time. So I bought his kit, and he said if I bought his kit, he would go ahead and put my frame on a jig if I brought him a bare frame and just weld it together for me. So I did that. I was like, hey, that's the way to go, because at the time I'm building this motorcycle. I'm living in a 2-bedroom house, and I'm actually took this thing apart and put it together in my spare bedroom on a couple of sheets of plywood. I took and cut down the belt cover, and I guess this would be called the cam cover, engine cover here. I cut those down to make them look more like an older panhead, shovel head type looking thing. Other than that, it's pretty much the motor and everything stock. It's got a longer drive belt on it. I didn't want to do a chain conversion when I done it because I don't like chains. All I do is sling oil on everything. And this thing ain't got enough horsepower to ever break that belt. The fuel tank leaks gas. This whole side of the motor stained from the fuel tank leaking. The oil tank leaks. It leaks out the around the clutch cable, which is probably just an O-ring. This seat has to be moved back probably 3 inches. So I've got to redo that. I'm gonna have to try to cut this bracket off without getting too crazy with the frame. I've got another piece of tubing just long enough to replace this piece of tubing. I'll probably move it back a couple inches. The oil tank has some cracks in it. I thought that it was leaking around the welds where I mounted it, but it's actually got cracks in it because this oil tank, I only mounted in 2 spots right here, and it's solid mounted. So I've got to figure out how to remount the oil tank, fix those cracks in it. I'll probably cut the brackets off of it and re-weld all this up. I don't know. At this point, if I make the oil tank ugly, it's not going to matter because I'm covering it with the seat for the most part anyways. I don't want to put the money into a new oil tank at this point. I'm trying to just get this thing running rideable with minimum cost. So my plan is to fix the fuel leak, fix the oil tank seat situation, and put a new tire on it. First thing I'm gonna do is get this gas tank off of it. If I'm gonna cut this seat bracket off and that pop off back there, I don't want sparks flying on the gas tank, especially because it leaks. I think it just leaks around the weld of the petcock. I'm not 100% on that, but hopefully it's that easy. I mean, if it's the petcock leaking itself, it'd be even easier than that, but hopefully it's an easy fix. I'm gonna drain the gas up. The gas smells pretty bad. This bike hasn't been rode in 6-7 months, so the gas isn't in too great a shape. But I'll get this tank taken off, and we'll figure out a way to test it see where it's leaking from. So the best method I found to find small leaks is just put the soap straight on. You can either brush it on or however you can get it on there just as thick as possible when they're like super tiny leaks, which this one is. So I put that dish soap on there, and I just stuck this air nozzle in the petcock and blew on it, and you can see it bubbling up right there. It's a super tiny leak. I mean, it's just a little pinhole, but it's right there. So I'm gonna mark that. I'm gonna clean this up somehow, and I'm gonna take my welder and just tack it to tack a couple times. Maybe I can get it to stop. I think I've got the gas tank fixed. I've got gas in it up to about right here, and I've left this piece of paper under it. It's been under it for about 4 days, so it's not dripping. Let me tell you what I did. I didn't record any of it because I did it like after work one night. I dumped all the gas out of it, sprayed the inside of it out with brake cleaner. Then I took it over and just washed it out with the water hose for a little bit. Then I sprayed a little WD-40 inside it to try to keep it from rusting. Once I did that, I took a lighter and I stuck it down the tank and lit it and burned it around. Nothing caught on fire, so I figured At that point, I'm in the clear. So I cleaned it up, I tested it again. I ended up finding like 4 little pinholes, and I mean, they were super tiny, but they were pinholes. And I just welded it all up. And it looks like crap because I used my MIG welder, and well, I'm not a very good welder. So I welded that all up. I welded it good enough it's not leaking. That's really all that matters to me. So now that I have that to where it's not leaking, that's one thing knocked off my list. Next thing I do is probably work on moving the seat and the oil tank. So I figured I'd set on the bike to explain what my issue is with the seat. I feel like it's moved too far forward when I mounted it. My legs, I like for my leg to be a little bit straighter, so I think moving it back a couple inches, putting it where I'm sitting in this position is gonna be more comfortable for me. Plus, if moving it back, I'm gonna close this gap up a little bit, so I think that'll look a little bit more cleaner. It should lower the seat ride height because I'm gonna move it back here on the backbone where it's a little bit lower. So it's gonna put me in a lower position, farther away from the pegs, farther away from the handlebars. I think it's gonna be more comfortable for me, and hopefully it's just a more comfortable ride altogether, and I guess hopefully it looks better too. So that's the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut this bracket off. I got these springs loose. I'm gonna cut this bracket off. I'm gonna move it back to about right here, and we'll see what it looks like from there. All right, I got that piece ground off there. I put it about right here and fit the seat on there, and I really like it right here. But with it right here, there's no way that these mounting brackets are gonna work. I'm gonna end up having to cut this tube off. I've got it just enough tubing to make another piece to go across here. I'm gonna have to move it back some. Then I'm gonna have to figure out how to remount my oil tank because I won't be able to mount it off the same way off of this tube, which this is a horrible way to mount one. That's why it's cracked, because it's mounted solid. So I'm gonna get all this junk cut off here, get a new piece of tubing fit in here, and we'll see how it's gonna look. So I got the original tubing cut off. I got that bracket cut off and moved back. I just tack welded everything. I ordered new springs and new spring holders for the frame. So, like I said, I just tacked everything. I'm gonna take this thing for a ride around a little bit before I decide to weld this back. Next thing I need to do is figure out my oil tank. I bought some new brackets for the oil tank, mounting brackets. I bought some from TC Bros. They're like rubber mounted brackets. I hope that helps with my issue I have with the oil tank. Let me show you what I got going on here. Originally, I just had these things welded in there. I just had it mounted on each side, just on the top, and this thing's actually cracked across here and right here. Originally I thought this thing cracked because the frame was flexing, but once I took it off, you see this mark right here. I think what's happening is the belt's slapping that. So when you're throttling in and out, that belt was slapping this and just causing it to wiggle, and that's why it cracked right there. So I'm gonna try to mount it just a hair higher than it was, and I'm gonna mount 2 on the top and then 1 on the bottom. That should keep it from wiggling, even if the belt slaps it, which I'm sure the belt's gonna slap it. Also, being rubber mounted, it should have enough play that hopefully it won't crack again. But I think what I'm gonna do is find the end of these cracks and drill a hole and weld it back. And I think I'm just gonna cut this whole piece off and just weld up the hole that where these are. So that's gonna be a little bit work, but yeah, that's my plan, is to cut these off, find the edge of each side of the crack, drill a little hole, and try to weld it. And then I'm gonna try to clean it up as best I can. So my reason for patching this oil tank and reusing it is because I really like the looks of it. Plus all the lines go on the bottom. This middle one's like the vent, and it's got a tube that goes up inside it and comes up here. I just like the way this looks. It's cleaner than having your oil lines run up to the top of the tank. But on top of that is, I'm really kind of on a budget here, so I don't want to have to buy a new tank. If I could fix this one, I'm going to use it. Same thing with the little brackets on the seat. I had to buy new springs. I had to buy new pieces to hold the springs. And I went ahead and bought brackets to hold this tank. I've got about $100 in parts. I still got to buy a new tire. That's going to be a couple $100. So hopefully, just getting it running and rideable, I'll have, a few $100s in it, no more than that. and we can go out and ride it and have some fun on it. But I got the mounts cut off of it, and there's a crack on each side of these welds. So I just drilled a hole on each end of it. I'm just gonna weld up the hole and just make a bead right there on both sides of it. And then to fill this hole, I actually cut the bottom off of the brackets that was on there. I'm just gonna take a magnet, hold it in there, and just weld that up. But hopefully I can get it to not leak oil and make it look decent. And I'll probably end up welding the other brackets on top of it somewhere in this area. I couldn't use the same spot because these are too close to the frame. So the other brackets will be offset a little bit, but I'm gonna weld this up and clean all the shavings and everything out of the inside of the tank. Maybe put some air on it and just make sure that it's not leaking anything. I got this thing welded up, it doesn't leak. Man, I am wore out from it. I've been probably welding on this thing for 2 hours. I would weld a little bit, grind it down smooth, and I would test it, and I'd have a pinhole. Then I would do it again, I'd have a pinhole here, and I'd have a pinhole there, just chasing little leaks. As of now, you can put air on it, spray it down with soap, no bubbles. So it does hold. It looks like crap, but I'll probably cover that with Bondo or something. I'll make it look better. Now to mount this thing, I got these little brackets from TC Bros, and it's basically the brackets like this. You put a grommet in it, and then you put a sleeve inside that grommet, and it bolts together, and it gives it some, it gives it a little play. So hopefully that'll keep it from cracking again. I went ahead and put a couple pieces of cardboard on the bottom of the frame, taped them on there to space the oil tank off the frame. So hopefully it doesn't rattle. Put 2 pieces on the front, 1 on each side on the top. It's still pretty tight. I might have to figure out something to hold this on there. But it'll basically sit back there like that, and then I'll weld those tabs up on the top. I ended up zip tying it. Zip ties worked. Zip tied it on each side, zip tied it to this bar, leveled this out, made sure my distance was the same on both sides. Put a couple decent tacks on both of these tabs, and I've tacked the little pieces on the oil tank there. So I'm gonna take this off, weld them up, probably finish welding those up, get my bottom tab on there, and I'll probably just show you what it looks like when I'm done. All right, I'm not sure how well you can see it, but I got a bracket welded on each side on the top, and then I've got one that holds the bottom of the tank right there. I don't know if you can see that one or not in the camera. Basically, right there and right there. I think with the one on the bottom holding it now, plus it being rubber mounted, when the belt does catch it for some reason, it won't make it crack anymore. So hopefully I got the cracking issue fixed. The crack issue fixed. But I'm gonna get this thing bolted on. I'm gonna pour a little oil in it, and I'm gonna take this thing for a ride up and down the road a few times just to see if I like where my seat's sitting. Then I'll pull it back in here and I'll weld all this up, and we'll spray a little paint on it, and we'll be done with this area anyways. Took it up the road on a test ride, and I really liked where the seat location was and everything, so I took it apart and welded that. And while I was on the test ride, I noticed a sound, like a weird noise in my primary. So I took the primary cover off and then took all this stuff apart, just inspected everything. I even pulled the clutches out. The clutches look fine. So I don't know what the noise was. It may have just been a fluke deal because I didn't find anything wrong. The noise might have came from my exhaust gasket that was blown out, which I just replaced. So when I put it back together, I ride up down the road again, see if I hear any noises. So it could have just been the exhaust gasket making the noise. I don't know. I just know it's a weird noise. Honestly, it sounded like I thought my front wheel bearing was bad. But when I put it in neutral, it didn't make the noise anymore. So I thought maybe then it was in my clutches. But like I said, took all this apart. Everything looks good. I'm not worried about this area anymore. I got this thing put back together yesterday during the rain. Didn't record any of it because it was crazy loud in here with the rain going. And I got probably 90% of the problems that was on this bike fixed. The more I look at it, the more I see that needs to be done. But as far as the things I've done so far, I've fixed the fuel tank. I rerouted the fuel line into the carburetor. It was, the way it was ran before, it was like vapor locking. and it was kind of a pain in the butt. I fixed the cracks in the oil tank. I remounted it, and I used the TC Bro mounting kit, which I think is going to work out pretty good. I moved the seat back like 3 inches, cut this bar off, re-welded it so I can mount my springs on it. When I took this fender off to weld this, I realized that the bottom bracket on the fender was broke, so I fixed it. Mounted up a new rear tire. I went with the Metzler Cruise Tech because I've got a Metzler on the front. I figured I'd just put a Metzler on the back of it too to kind of match them. I went with the Cruise Tech. It's supposed to be a little stickier of a tire, so hopefully it gets good traction. I've taken the primary completely apart and put it back together because I heard some noises on it the first time I rode it, and I don't know what the noises were, but somehow I magically fixed them by taking a bunch of stuff apart and putting it back together. So I'm glad, whatever it was, I'm glad it's not making the noise now because it was starting to bother me. Replaced the intake or the exhaust gaskets because the front one was leaking really horribly bad. Put new oil lines on it. When I put the tank on there, the old oil lines that was on it was kind of starting to dry rot and stuff, so I put new oil lines on it. The first time I rode it, when I got it back, I heard it rattling, and I think it was the battery tray. The battery tray was really loose, so I fixed it, had to kind of redo the mounts on it to get it to not rattle. So it's not rattling anymore. About got all the rattles fixed on it, which is good because when I hear rattling, it just, I don't know, it bothers me. The next thing on my list to do is handlebars. These handlebars are, I don't know what they come off of. I don't believe that they're Harley bars. They may be. They even with the riser clamp tight, as tight as you can get it, they still move back and forth. The throttle doesn't, with it tightened all the way tight as it can go, you can move the whole throttle bracket. I mean, I can actually pull this hand grip off. The levers actually seem to clamp on it just fine. They're clamped right at where the dimples are. So I don't know. They may be aftermarket Harley bars. They may come off of something else. I don't know what they're off of. But when I built this bike, originally I had like some really narrow drag bars on it, and I really like those. I tried to. Originally, I wanted this bike to be super narrow, like a lane splitter style bike, but I'm gonna kind of go with that theme. I'm gonna replace these handlebars with a set of handlebars that's a little bit more narrow. They got about the same rise on them. I think they're just a hair shorter than these. I don't think this brake line doesn't really work with these bars, but I don't think it'll work with the other bars like at all. I may be able to bend it around, make it work temporarily. Once I get them on here, I'll probably measure for a new brake line. We'll put a new brake line on it. But the bars I went with are the bootlegger bar from TC Bros. They mount directly to the top tree, so I'll eliminate this riser clamp totally. They're probably like 8 inches narrower than these bars are, so it's gonna give me that kind of a skinny look to it anyways. They're not quite as high. I wish they was like the same height as these because I really do like the height of these bars, but I don't know. Let's get them bolted on there and see what they look like. So the first thing I'm gonna do is just take the levers off, probably just leave them hanging. I'll unbolt the bar off of the riser clamp. Then I can get the throttle off of there. It'll just slide off the end then. So T27 to get these bolts loose. And if you lose one of these bolts because it vibrates out, they're like $1 at the Harley shop, so don't try to replace them with something else. It's kind of silly looking. They're $1. It's like the cheapest thing you'll ever buy from the Harley shop. All right, I got both the levers unbolted, just kind of hanging there. I'm gonna go ahead and take this hand grip off before I loosen this riser clamp. And the easiest way I know to do that is with the air gun. You can take and get air up underneath this grip and you'll just be able to slide it right off. Now I've not done this on a motorcycle. It's the way I used to do them on bicycles, and they just come right off. So let's try it on this motorcycle. Works like a charm. Now it takes 1/4 inch Allen to loosen these off. So I'm gonna loosen these off, get this throttle off of there. Then we'll work on getting this riser off of here. And to take the bolts off the bottom, you'll need a 3/4 socket. I went ahead and put the top clamp back on my riser clamp. That way when I start loosening this off, the whole riser doesn't start spinning. In order to get this bolt out, you gotta take your headlight off. I got the riser completely off, but I couldn't get the bolt to slide out because it's hitting the back of the headlight. So just take the headlight off to start with and you shouldn't have any issues. Plus, they're easier to get to if you take the headlight off. Should've just done that to start with. Now to take these rubber pieces out, just got a washer on top of it. You take your trusty punch. Mine's a short extension here. You knock that sleeve out, you should be able to pry these out. Yeah. Just take my extension and knock that rubber out the bottom. That's pretty much it for taking those out. So these aluminum bushings just go in where your rubber bushings were. And it fits just like that. Then you just take the other bushing, it goes into the bottom with your bolt. Then we can thread this on, get this thing started in here. About to see what these handlebars look like on here. Well, they're definitely narrower than what I had on there. Let's go ahead and put the light back on there. They're so narrow right here that make this look big. So I'm gonna get this headlight tightened up. Then we'll go ahead and put the levers and the throttle on there and the hand grip. All right, I got them on there. Got the handles on there. The brake line looks pretty terrible, but hey, it works. And it'll work until I get a new one in. I'll probably just go with do away with the hard lines and just go with like a braided line all the way down to the rotor there. So when I built this, I put mid-controls on it to try to help soften up the bumps. I mean, you can actually lift your body up a little bit off the seat with the mid-controls, but it's pretty uncomfortable to ride that way, like if you go very far, basically. So I was digging around through my pile of motorcycle parts over there, and I found these chrome pieces right here, and then these are like the original pegs off the back of the Sportster. And there's a hole right here in the motor mount, and I think I'm just gonna mount those right there like that. Give me a little bit of a highway bar to rest my feet on when my legs start cramping up on these bars. So I'm gonna get those put on there. And I mean, this is basically just a bunch of junk I had laying around. I'm gonna make it work. I figure I'd bring you over to this side so I can show you. This hole right here, I'm not exactly sure what it's for, but that's what I'm gonna use it for, is to put that there. The clutch cable's kind of in the way. I probably better put the clutch cable on top. Well, let's see what we think about them. Once I shift through the gears, throw my legs up there. Yeah, it ain't too bad. Straightens the legs out a little bit. I could probably actually lay my legs down like that on them too. So yeah, once I get through all the gears, like going down the highway, I can put them up there. Helps me out a little bit. Reposition my butt from all the butt pain I'm gonna have. I could sit on one side like this for a little while. Maybe opposite, you know, one peg on the front, one on the back. Sit on this side. Yep, I think it's gonna work out. It gives me a little bit more options for my legs, so. I don't know, all we got left to do now is test ride the thing, see what it feels like. Well, final thoughts after test riding it. The bars are definitely gonna take some getting used to. I like that they're solid. I'm used to like a really wide bar. My Fat Boy has like really wide bars, and the bars on here were, I don't know, about, like I said, almost a foot wider than these. So I'm used to wider bars. So these narrow bars are definitely gonna take some getting used to, but I'll let you know down the road how I like them. The highway pegs on the front, all they did was make me want forward controls. I mean, it's so much better riding with your feet up there than it is right here. It's crazy how much more comfortable it is. So yeah, May have to put 4 controls on it one day, but I'm gonna leave it like it is for now. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. I know it was kind of like all over the place. I didn't get to film a whole lot of it because I did most of the work on it last weekend and it was raining. And when it's raining, you can't hear anything in the shop other than the rain. But I did get a lot done to it. It's rideable. I did ride it around a little bit yesterday, so it will ride. It's not running the best, but it is rideable. June 17th, which will probably be the day I drop this video on YouTube, I'll be going to Mocan, and I plan on taking this bike unless something happens between now and then. If I don't take this bike, I might take my Fat Boy. It's a motorcycle drags. I probably just do the what they call the fun run, the time runs. Won't be actually racing. Just we'll take it and have fun. Just run it down the track, see what it'll do. If you liked anything on this video, let me know. Give me a thumbs up. Click that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments if you want to see more of this bike or more motorcycle stuff in general, honestly. And as always, thanks for watching.
Okay.